بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. My brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you all in this session, inshallah. And as you are aware, this is the third session in this series of classes entitled Honoring the Parents in Islam. We are aiming to study, inshallah, the virtues, excellence, the importance, which is something that we have covered in the first two sessions. And in today's session, inshallah, we will be beginning speaking about the adab or the etiquettes involved in maintaining kindship, kindness, and dutifulness towards one parent. So today, بإذن الله تعالى, we will be speaking about the adab التعامل مع الوالدين. What are the etiquettes that are required for us to deal with the parents, for us to be included in this reward, the reward that we spoke quite extensively in the first two sessions. And the plan, inshallah, is to leave the fiqh issues for the following session, inshallah, the fourth session. Today, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we'll try to cover everything related to how to deal with the parents, birr al-walidain, and how to avoid, on the other hand, how to avoid uquq al-walidain. So how to gain and secure the reward of birr al-walidain, and how to avoid uquq al-walidain, which is the neglecting their rights and transgressing against them in the slightest of ways. So to begin with, let's begin by studying this word, al-birr, birrul walidain. And you will be mindful that this is the word the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used in the hadith. You know, when he spoke about the most rewarding and the most beloved acts of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said birrul walidain. After he mentioned as-salat, he said birrul walidain. So what is the word birr? Birr, الراغب.
Sorry, is the YouTube link active? I can't seem to connect it.
It is active, yes. Yes.
I'm on your channel. I can't see it. Sorry.
Yeah, it is active actually, and there are 12 people listening now.
Okay, maybe it's a mistake on my side.
Okay. طيب. So what is al-birr? And this is something that we always do before we delve into how to apply anything. We need to put effort into understanding what is it, how it's defined, how it's defined linguistically to begin with, and then also how it's defined from a Shar'i point of view. Is there any difference between the Shar'i description and the linguistic definition? So Al-Raghib Al-Asbahani, rahimahullah, he says in Mufradat Al-Fadh Al-Quran, he says, Al-birr التوسع في الخير والفضل. Al-birr, he says, is for one to be generous in the acts of righteousness and in the acts of generosity. So it is not just the mere fact of one to be generous or being kind, no, but rather for one to be generous in that, to be expanding and inclusive to all aspects of righteousness. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he spoke about birr in the Quran, he says, لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ, or rather, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not attain the highest rank of ibadah, which is al-birr. Al-birr basically is for one to be extreme, if you like, to become extreme or very dedicated in covering all aspects of righteousness. So al-bar is basically not simply somebody who is salih. Al-rajul al-bar wal-rajul al-salih. Al-rajul al-salih is somebody who does righteous deeds, whereas al-bar or al-abrar are those people who are especially dedicated, people who are exceptionally motivated and covering all aspects of ibadat, whereby they are very good with their salah, they are very good with their seeking of ilm, they are very good in their fasting, with their sadaqah. So al-birr is really the station of Islam where one is reaching that level. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about innal abrara lafi na'im. Those who have reached that level whereby they became very good at all aspects of ibadah, then they are indeed in a bliss. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ, you will not attain al-birr, حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ, until you spend from that which you love. Because attaining righteousness is difficult for somebody who has clinging attitude towards wealth and possessions. So if you learn how to let go of your possessions, of your money, then you will be able to let go of some of your time, a lot of your luxuries, a lot of things that usually stop you from the ibadat. But if you are the kind of person who holds on to your possessions, then you will find it very difficult to dedicate yourself for ibadah. The point here is al-birr is not merely for one to be righteous, but rather to be exceptionally dedicated in covering all aspects of righteousness. So that's what al-birr is. And a person who is practicing birr is called bar, the plural of which is al-abrar, as we see in Surah Al-Infitar, inna al-abrara lafi na'im. So that's what Al-Raghib Al-Asfahani said in terms of defining the word birr. Birr is for one to be dedicated, exceptionally motivated to cover all aspects of goodness, and to be super generous in their righteousness. Ibn al-Athir, rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book An-Nihaya fi Gharib al-Hadith, one of the books in which he explains the terminologies that appear in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he expounds on them and he explains them. He says, speaking about this hadith, al-birr bil-kasri huwa al-ihsan. So Ibn al-Athir, he says these two words are synonymous, they are equal to one another. Al-birr wal-ihsan. Al-birr bil-kasr huwa al-ihsan. Being dedicated to cover all aspects of goodness, all aspects of righteousness, to be super motivated, is basically being muhsin, being dedicated, being the kind of person who not only perfects their actions, but they beautify them as well. And with this, we understand that the word birr in relation to looking after the parents and maintaining them did not appear in the Quran. The word that appeared in the Quran is al-ihsan, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ إِحْسَانًا. إِحْسَانًا. We commanded man with regards to his parents that he will show them ihsan. So the word that appears over and over in the Quran in relation to looking after parents is ihsan, and the word that appeared in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is al-birr. And essentially, Ibn al-Athir rahmatullah alayh has benefited us with this definition. He says al-birr and al-ihsan are exactly the same thing. And then he says, Ibn al-Athir, he says, وَهُوَ اسم جامع للخير. Al-birr ismun jami'un lil khair. It's one word that you could use to all aspects of righteousness. Ismun, one noun that comprehensively covers all aspects of righteousness. And the most basic form of it, he says, وَأَصْلُهُ الطَّاعَةِ. The most basic form of it is obedience. So one is not muhsin in their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until they began by obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You obey Him on the obligations first, and then you excel on top of that by adding more of the optionals. So the most basic form of birr is to cover all the obligations to begin with, and then to keep on adding all all righteousness, all types of righteousness on top of that. And this is also, you will be mindful that is one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name that are mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, one of them is Al-Barr. And we find this in Surah Al-Tur, chapter 52, in verse 28. Inna kunna min qablu nad'uuhu innahu huwa al-barru ar-rahim. The people of Jannah, when they sit together in Jannah and they try to explain and mention how did they make it to Jannah, some of them will say, Inna kunna min qablu nad'uuh. we used to dedicate a lot of time in making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is how we made it. So, and then they said, إِنَّا كُنَّا مِن قَبْلُ نَدْعُوهُ إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْبَرُّ الرَّحِيمُ. So what did they find from their dua? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was al-bar. Al-bar, meaning one who would give generously, and he will never cease to give, and he will give in all types of kindness. He will not give you from one type and deprive you from another type. He is so generous, and he is most merciful. So they said that one of the ways in which we made it to Jannah is by making sure that in dunya we made lots of dua. Inna kunna min qablu nad'uuhu. And then they said, Innahu huwa al-barru rahim. For verily, he is al-bar. Al-bar. Al-bar means one who is exceptionally good at giving, exceptionally known for generosity, and so on and so forth. Ar-Rahim is the most merciful.
Sure.
Yes.
We understood that from Ibn al-Ashir, he said al-bir and al-ihsan is synonymous.
Yes.
And he mentioned al-bir is mentioned in the Sunnah and al-ihsan is mentioned in the Quran. Is that correct?
Yes. In relation, the word bir is mentioned in the Quran, but not in relation to the parents, looking after the parents. It is mentioned in other contexts, but in relation to the parents in the Quran, the word that is used repeatedly and frequently is the word al-ihsan, and we've established that they are synonymous. So one of the definitions of the word al-bar in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if one asks you, what is the meaning of the word al-bar? Inna Allah huwa al-bar. One of his names is al-bar. You can simply say al-muhsin. Al-muhsin, the one that gives generously, the one that gives often in all types of gifts and blessings. Does that make sense?
Sheikh, you know, in Surah Maryam, with regards to Yahya, it says وَبَرًّا بِوَالِدَيْهِ وَلَكُمْ يَكُنْ جَبَّارًا عَصِيًّا.
Yes, but I was talking about the commandments from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah commands, He commands us to show ihsan. Did you see my point?
Yes.
Whereas in the Sunnah, the word we find is al-bir. So anyway, we established that the two words are quite synonymous. Fulfilling the basics, ihsan and bir, meaning fulfilling the basics, which is obedience, and then going the extra mile by dedicating yourself to show all types of kindness and all types of dedication towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you are showing ihsan towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in our topic today, we are talking about the parent. And that's why the Arabs would say, if somebody says barartu walidi, if somebody says that I have shown bir to my parent, what does that mean? It means ahsantu ilayhima, or ahsantu ilayhi, I have shown him ihsan. How? بطاعته, by obeying him, والرفق به, by being gentle towards them, وتحري محابه, and to try to dedicate oneself to anticipate what are the things the parent like and what kind of things they love, to make sure that you do them before they even ask. وتوقي مكارههما, and to avoid at your level best anything that they dislike. So this is bir. It begins by the basic level, obeying their commandments if they ask something of you. And then number 2, to be gentle towards them. Number 3 is to anticipate the kind of things they love and to do them before they ask for them. The third thing, or the fourth thing, is to anticipate and try to learn what is it, the kind of things that they do not like and they do not appreciate, and then to avoid them. Some ulama, when they defined birr al-walidain, they said birr al-walidain huwa al-ihsanu ilayhima. So birr al-walidain, again, look at the word bir and ihsan coming together. Birr al-walidain al-ihsanu ilayhima, to become dedicated and to be exceptional in your dutifulness towards them. But then they said al-ihsanu ilayhima bil-qalbi wal-qawli wal-fi'l, with your heart, and then by your speech, and then by your actions. Your heart, by wishing them well, by loving them, by being merciful and compassionate towards them, by trying to learn what is it that they like, what type of personality they are. Because being kind towards people in general and in particular the parent, is difficult unless you learn what type of a personality your mother has and what type of personality your father has, and as a result you decide how best to deal with your parent. So in your heart you should have that level of dedication. So you love them, you care for them, you wish them well, you wish them the longest of life in health and prosperity and righteousness, and at the same time you are dedicated in your heart. You try your best to make sure that you try to understand what pleases them and do it before they even ask, and what displeases them and you avoid it before they even complain. So that's with the heart. You show ihsan towards them with your heart and with your speech, being gentle, speaking to them with kindness. Wal-fi'l, also by doing actions that prove how much love you have towards them. And then they added to the definition, تقربا لله تعالى. تقربا لله تعالى, seeking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Because if you do all of this, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in your mind, this is not going to be called birrul walidain from the Islamic religious perspective. So birrul walidain is only an act of worship, something for which you get rewarded and you get those excellent virtues if you do them seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we learned, anything that you do for the sake of Allah, you will be able to perfect. Anything that you do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be able to endure and persist on. And if you do anything for other than the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it will not benefit you in this dunya, and you will not be able to persist on it, and it will not benefit you definitely in the akhirah. For example, when it comes to looking after the parent, if you do it because of you want to be the favorite son, sometimes this may be the motivation. Your motivation is not only to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but rather to be the favorite son. And as a result, you hear stories of some people or some children who will speak to their parents ill about their other siblings, because the intention here is not to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but rather to attain this station in the heart of their parents. And in doing so, they hurt the parent indirectly, because how would the parent feel when they know something negative about their own children? Right? So if somebody is doing something for the sake of Allah, they will always succeed in it. They will do it in the right of ways. For example, you will only be able to maintain gentleness and patience and love towards your parents if you're not expecting anything in return. Oftentimes, you'll find that the test that one can have about their parents is that they are tested with parents that are a little bit harsh or difficult to please. You'll find that if you're not doing this for the sake of Allah, you will do it in one occasion, in two occasions, a third occasion, but the fourth one, when you don't see them reciprocating, they're not showing you love back, then you'll end up stopping, because to begin with, you did not do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why the ulama, they emphasized that birrul walidain is when you show ihsan to your parents with your heart, with your speech, with your actions, and then they added تقربا لله تعالى, seeking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seeking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the definition of birr al-walidain in terms of linguists, and also in terms of the Islamic understanding or the conventions of the ulama when they speak about birr al-walidain. The opposite of birr al-walidain is uquq al-walidain. Uquq. Okay, so birr al-walidain is in one side of the spectrum. In the far end of the spectrum, you find uquq al-walidain, which is exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite, in the sense that it is exactly one, birr al-walidain is one of the most important of all obligations and the most highly rewarding act of worship, whereas the other one is one of the most destructive, sinful deeds, one of the major sins, to be undutiful towards one's parents. So if you understood the definition of birr al-walidain, flip that and you will understand what uquq al-walidain is. So uquq al-walidain begins by what? Or let me define to you what aqqa عقّ means linguistically. عقّ means to sever something, to cut something. So that's why al-birr, another word for it is sila, to show sila, to connect, to rekindle your relationship with your parents, to have a connection with somebody, that will be called birr al-walidain as well. And that's why we have the word silatul arham. Silatul arham meaning maintaining the ties of kinship. So birr, another word for it is silatul rahim. طيب, silatul rahim, with regards to the parents, with regards to the extended family, and so on and so forth. So birr is when you connect with somebody with love, respect, kindness, generosity, dutifulness, and so on and so on and so forth. عقوق الوالدين, عقّ linguistically means to sever or to cut something. So when you cut the ties with your parents such that you will not do what they command you, you will not dedicate yourself to pleasing them, you will not go out of your way to fulfill their obligations, then that will be called عقوق الوالدين. When the ulama, they defined what عقّ means, عقّ أباه, they said in لغة الفقهاء, one of the recent books, they said عقّ أباه إذا استخف به وعصاه وترك الإحسان إليه. So عقّ أباه means he severed his parent, whether the father or the mother. He severed his parent, and this happens when they look down upon this person's right upon them. So in the heart, you no longer hold them in high esteem. You no longer feel indebted towards them. You no longer feel gratitude towards them. So this is uquq that begins from the heart. So they said إذا استخف به, when they look down upon them, when they don't care about what they think, they don't care about what makes them happy, what makes them displeased. So that's called istighfaf, to belittle somebody, to look down upon them. وعصاه, and to add to that, you disobey them when they command. And وَتَرْكُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَيْهِ, that you will abandon showing them dutifulness or showing them kindness, and all of that. All of this is عقوق الوالدين. Ibn al-Athir rahmatullahi alayh, when he spoke about عقوق الوالدين, again in explaining the hadith, he says عقوق الوالدين هو إغضابهما بترك الإحسان إليهما. To be عاق, or to be opposite to birr al-walidain, is for one to anger or displease his parents by not showing them ihsan. And that's a very sensitive, subhanAllah, definition, because what he's saying there, that the parents will be expecting a lot from you, rightly so, because they gave birth to you, they were the cause of your existence and coming to this world, and they have dedicated their life towards you. And those of you who are parents, you will understand, subhanAllah, how much parents have to go through, the mother and the father, how much they have to go to design their life so that it revolves around you as a child. So their life is defined by you. Since you came to this world, they no longer live their life. They live their life in your terms. So they have dedicated their life to you, and as a result, and rightly so, they would be expecting a little bit of respect, a little bit of dedication from you, a little bit of sensitivity from your part to them. You'll be thinking about them. You will be trying your best. That's what they would expect from you. And as a result, if you don't do that, they will be angered. They will be displeased. Not only if you fail to do the obligations, but even when you neglect some of the fine acts of dutifulness and kindness towards them, something that is not an obligation, but that could anger them. So Ibn al-Athir rahmatullahi alayhi, he says, هو إغضابهما عقوق الوالدين. The عقوق is إغضابهما, to anger them or displease them by abandoning showing them ihsan, showing them kindness, and perfecting your treatment and dealing towards them. Some other scholars, when they define what عقوق الوالدين, and it's very important that we listen to scholars, because otherwise we will be pursuing something. Otherwise, we will be pursuing something that we do not understand. So, for example, the ulama, they said, عقوق الوالدين كل فعل يتأذى به الوالدان تأذيا ليس بالهين. So anything that that causes discomfort to the parent in a significant way, even if it's not a major thing. However, it has to be not of the obligations. So, for example, what they are saying in this definition, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to do something and your parents are displeased with that, then you are not obliged. You are not obliged to fulfill their wishes. If their wishes goes against the obligations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated upon you. Another definition, they said, ما يتأذى به الوالدان من ولدهما من قول أو فعل إلا في شرك أو معصية. So they said عقوق الوالدين is when you hurt the feeling of your parents by words or actions, except if they command you or they want you to do something that is pertaining to shirk or something that is sinful and disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then they added ما لم يتعنت الوالدان, meaning as long as the parents are reasonable. As long as the parents are reasonable. Sometimes certain parents, they can go over the top with this and they can become a source of misery in the life of their children. And what they ask of them is something that is unreasonable, something that is not Islamically required, something that is not common sense. It is not a common expectation among other parents. When they are like this, and if they become hurt by something that is unreasonable, then the son or the daughter are not going to be sinning. Right? Example to this: if some parents, for example, they expect you to call them every hour, right? Every hour to check on them or to let them know where you are, and you fail to do this because practically this is difficult. And as a result, this will not be called عقوق الوالدين, because this is called ta'annut, where the parent or the mother or the father are asking something of the parent, of the son, that is not reasonable. Another definition, they said, the ulama, they said عقوق الوالدين كل قول أو فعل أو ترك يتأذى به الوالدين. They said عقوق الوالدين is every speech, every action, and every abandonment as well. Every abandonment of an action. So what you do and what you abandon to do. Right? If that hurts them, if that hurts their feelings, then this is also عقوق الوالدين, again, provided that what they are expecting of you is not against the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time, as long as they are being reasonable in what they expect of you. So this is an important definition. And I encourage you always to make sure that you understand the definition of whatever you are seeking to learn and whatever you are seeking to implement, because that will help you a lot when it comes to confusing situations and confusion questions, inshallah. So now, as I said, we will be studying, inshallah, certain etiquettes when it comes to dealing with the parents. We will begin by studying those etiquettes that are mentioned in a text, whether it's the Quran or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, something that is mentioned in a text. So I will begin by saying the basic level of showing kindness to the parents is to obey them when they command. So you could write number 1, طاعة الوالدين فيما يأمران, to obey the parents in that which they ask of you. And this is directly taken from the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Luqman, chapter 31, verse 15, وَإِنْ جَاهَدَاكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٌ فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا وَصَاحِبُهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيا مَعْرُوفًا. We mentioned previously in Surah Al-Ankabut that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَوَصَّيْنَا الْإِنسَانَ بِوَالِدَيْهِ إِحْسَانًا, and we've commanded man in relation to his parent that he will show them ihsan. And from the definition that we just learned now, the basic level of ihsan is obedience. You cannot seek to beautify your relationship with your parents and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by doing things that are not an obligation upon you until you fulfill the obligations. So ta'a, obedience of the parents, is the most basic level of birrul walidain. except if what they are commanding of you is something that is shirk or something that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala added in that verse, in verse 15 of chapter 31, Surah Luqman, He says, وَإِن جَاهَدَاكَ, if they pressure you, عَلَىٰ أَن تُشْرِكَ بِي مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ, that you would commit shirk alongside my worship, that of which you have no knowledge, meaning something that doesn't exist. There's no God beside Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they command you to do something like that, فَلَا تُطِعْهُمَا, do not obey them. In any other situation that isn't against the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you must obey them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا, and accompany them in this dunya according to that which is ma'ruf. And ma'ruf is that which is commonly understood to be righteous. This definition is very important, or this part of the ayah adds on to the definition we mentioned previously concerning ta'annut, when the parent or one of them they become unreasonable in what they expect of you. So what is expected of you in terms of your birr towards them is to fulfill for them that which is commonly known, ma'ruf, that which is commonly known to be reasonable, to be acceptable, to be fair and just. And if they ask you something that is not ma'ruf, something that is not reasonable, then you're also excused for not obeying them or for not fulfilling their wishes. So as long as they ask you to do something that is not haram, you are required to do your level best to please them and to fulfill their wishes. So much so that the ulama did say that if the son or if the parent commands his son to break down their optional fast. So say, for example, the daughter is fasting Monday and Thursdays, for example. So one day the parent, the mother or the father, who is concerned about her health, in the middle of the day they tell her, you have to break your fast. Now the ulama, they stated she must break her fast, because what she's doing, what she's upon is optional, whereas obeying the parent for something that is not haram or something that is not neglecting to an obligation, an Islamic obligation or a religious obligation, obeying them is an obligation. So you cannot pursue something that is sunnah, fasting Mondays and Thursdays, and in the course of doing that, you neglect an obligation which is pleasing the parents and obeying them. سئل الإمام أحمد رحمه الله عن رجل يصوم التطوع فسأله أبواه أو أحدهما أن يفطر فقال يروى عن الحسن أنه قال يفطر وله أجر البر وأجر الصوم إذا أفطر. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he was asked about this specific question, a child that is fasting, or a son or a daughter that is fasting, and their parents command them to break their fast. His answer was that he should break their fast. He or she should break their fast. And he narrated from Al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah, he said he should break his fast and he will get the ajr of both, the ajr of birrul walidain and also the ajr of that fasting. So he will not lose out on that, because he intended to fast, but only for the fulfillment of a higher obligation. He or she broke their fast, so they will get the reward of it. So that's the first thing that you should understand. Al-walidain, if they ask of you anything, you should do your best to fulfill it, your best. Except if it's one, displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you should not fulfill their wishes in that situation. Secondly, if it's not ma'ruf, it is not reasonable, it is harsh, it is ghulm. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayh, to add to this, he said there are two conditions, or rather three conditions, that should be true in the case of any commandment you receive from your parents, for you to be obliged to fulfill it. He says, number one, it has to be in accordance to what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning it shouldn't go against the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They shouldn't be asking you to do something that is haram, and they shouldn't be expecting you to neglect something that is an obligation. So that's the first condition. It should be in accordance or in harmony with the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, is whatever they ask of you. This is Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayh adding 3 conditions. Number 2, he says that what they ask of you should be beneficial to them. Meaning, if they ask of you something that is not beneficial to them, this is a type of ta'annut. A silly example, if a parent wants to just exercise their powers and they say, okay, yani jump up and down 100 times, you know, or ask you something that is not reasonable, it's not something that comes back to them with benefit, then you're not obliged to fulfill. So the second condition, he says that they should ask you for something that comes to them with benefit. Number 3, what they ask of you should be something that does not harm you. If it harms you, then this is not ma'ruf. This is not commonly acceptable, that it is righteous for the parent to ask of their children. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayh, expounding on this ayah, the ayah of Surah Luqman, chapter 31, verse 15, he says, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا, and accompany them, being dutiful towards them, according to ma'ruf. He says ma'ruf is something that is in harmony with the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 2, something that is something that they ask of you which brings them beneficial to them. Number 3 is something that is not harmful to you. If they ask you of something that is harmful to you, obviously it will be against what Allah commands, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not allow anyone to oppress anyone else. La darara wa la dirar. No one is allowed to exercise oppression upon anyone else. So that's the first obligation towards parents, to be dutiful towards them according to these conditions and this description. Number 2 is to, this is again, I'm listing to you the commandments or the etiquettes that are listed in a text, either in the Quran or in the Sunnah. Number 2 here is to make sure that you lower your voice when you speak to them, and you speak to them softly. This is very important because it is mentioned explicitly in the Quran. In Surah Al-Isra, chapter 17, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse 23, he says, إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا. If one or both of them reach the old age with you, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا. Do not say to them the least of hurtful words, showing complaint, which is the word uff, showing that you are disturbed, you are displeased to be there for them or to obey them. وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا, and do not shout at them. So you cannot say the least of words like uff, and you cannot even scream and yell at them. وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. Say to them a type of speech that is very noble. And we quoted in previous session what Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib rahimahullah said in describing this ayah. He says, Al-Qawlul Kareem, a noble speech, is that which is expected from a servant, a mistaken servant, mean a servant that has, or a slave that has made a mistake, when he speaks to his harsh master. He says, قَوْلُ الْعَبْدِ الْمُتَذَلِّلِ لِلسَّيِّدِ الْفَضِّ الْغَلِيظِ. So the way you speak to your parents is as though you are a slave and you've made a mistake and you are addressing a master that is very harsh and very rigid in their treatment. Some of the Salaf, it was narrated that Ibn Awn, rahimahullah, one of the Salaf, his mom once called him out. She called him out from another room or something. And when he responded to her saying, "Yes, mom, I'm coming," he felt that his voice was louder than her voice. So she called him in a certain volume, and he returned her calling by saying, "Yes, mom, I'm coming." But then he felt that his voice was louder than hers, and he, as a punishment for himself, or to make up for that, he freed 2 slaves. See how sensitive the Salaf are when it comes to lowering their tone, speaking to their parents in the right way. So that's number 2. Number 3, توقيرهما والتذلل لهما, is to show them veneration and respect in the highest of levels. Tawqir is to show respect in the highest of levels, and to humble yourself towards them. To humble yourself, meaning that anything they ask of you, You should not be complaining. In fact, you should be celebrating and rejoicing the fact that this noble person that you hold in a very high esteem has honored you by asking you of something. That's what tawqir and humbling oneself implies. If they ask you, you should not show any complaint whatsoever. Rather, you should be showing the opposite. Many people they have a problem with this. When their parents ask of them something, they keep on comparing and they say, why me, dad, why me, mom, why can't my brother do it, why can't my sister do it, why does it have to be me all the time? So this is not in accordance to this guidance. And you remember the ayah of Surah Al-Isra where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ, and lower for them the wing of humility, the wing of humbleness out of mercy. And the ulama, they said what this means is they said that this is an example of the bird when it lowers its wings around its chicks. The bird that has its chicks below it, and it lowers its wings to protect the chicks. So they said this is how you should be towards your parent. You should be very soft and very gentle and very caring towards them, that when they speak anything to you, you should rush into fulfilling their commandments, and you should be feeling honored and rejoicing that they are asking that of you. Urwa rahimahullah, he says what this ayah means, huwa alla yamna'ahuma min shay'in arada, that he will not deny them anything they want. He said that khafdul janah, meaning to lower the wings of humility to your parents. What does that mean? He said it means that you will not deny them anything they want of you. Right? Tawus rahimahullah, also one of the tabi'een, he says, inna min as-sunnati an nuwaqqira arba'atan. He says when you look at the sunnah, we will learn that 4 people should be respected and venerated, highly held in very high esteem. Al-alimu wa dhu shaybati was-sultanu wal-walid. A scholar, number 1, a scholar, and an elderly person whose hair turned gray, and a sultan, somebody who is in power or in charge, somebody who's got an authority. They deserve to be receiving respect of you. And number 4, al-walid. And the word al-walid here, it means both the parent, whether it is the mother or the father. Right? And I will mention a few more things in detail. So I mentioned here the basic requirements. So that's number 3. Number 4, the ulama mentioned, according to what is mentioned explicitly in the text, he said that you should seek their permission when it comes to traveling a long travel or a long journey, whether it is seeking knowledge or otherwise, to make sure that you don't depart from where they live without seeking their permission. Obviously, because the parents suffer a lot when they don't see their parents in a usual or regular way. If they don't see him for a long period of time, that causes them a lot of pain in their hearts. So it is one of the requirements that if you should travel, you should make sure that you don't do that unless you seek their permission. Right? Also, despite the pain this will cause them, if they know that at least you sought their permission, that will make them feel better. You know, one of the worst things for a parent is to feel that their son or their daughter doesn't think at all in how they feel when they are not with them. You know, they feel that the son is completely heedless of my feelings and my emotions. The son hasn't seen me for X number of weeks, X number of months. They haven't called me, and they don't think anything of that. Okay? So as a son or as a daughter, you should realize that not seeing your parents, not calling your parents, is something that is so painful to their hearts. You know, you will not see it now, but when you become a parent yourself, you will understand how painful this is. So in Islam, you are required to not travel away from your parents unless you seek their permission. This will not reduce their pain, but it will at least make them feel that you are thinking about their pain. You are conscious that you being distant away from them is a very painful thing for them. Talha ibn Muawiyah as-Sulami radiyallahu anhu says, one of the companions, he says, أتيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقلت يا رسول الله إني أريد الجهاد في سبيل الله. This Sahabi said, I came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم to him, Ya Rasulullah, I'd like to join you in jihad. I would like to join the Mujahideen, O Rasulullah. قال, the Prophet said, أمك حية? قلت نعم. He said, is your mother alive? He said, yes, O Prophet of Allah. Then the Prophet he says, إلزم رجلها فثم الجنة. He says, stay with her feet. Jannah is there. Jannah is under the feet of your mother. Meaning, go there and make sure that you become dutiful towards her. Obviously, the ulama, they said this is provided that this jihad that is mentioned here is not an obligatory jihad. It's not where the Muslims are being invaded in their own territories, or the person is not actually at the fighting lines or at the battlefield itself. If that's the situation, if you are either fighting at the battlefield, for example, and then your parent says, come back, you cannot leave the battlefield there and then. Or if you are, or the Muslim territories or the Muslim borders are being invaded and you are there, or the Sultan or the governor of the Muslims commanded you by name and said you are needed in the front line, then in these three situations, you don't need to seek the parents' permission to go for jihad. But if it's optional jihad, jihad al-talab as they call it, where you are doing jihad just for the sake of expanding the da'wah, expanding the territories of the Muslims, then in that case, seeking the permission of the parents is an obligation. And if they don't permit you to do that, you are not allowed to go to join the jihad. So if this is said about the jihad, then the same thing can be said about any other type of travel. And a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, given his bay'ah. He said, Ya Rasulullah, ji'tu ubayi'uka ala al-hijrah. O Prophet of Allah, I came to give you my allegiance that I will migrate with you. And then he says, وَتَرَكْتُ أَبَوَيَّ يَبْكِيَانِ. And I've left my parents crying. The Prophet ﷺ told him, إِرْجِعْ عَلَيْهِمَا فَأَضْحِكْهُمَا كَمَا أَبْكَيْتَهُمَا. He says, go back and make them laugh like the way you make them cry. So they said that he told him, like, how you make them cry? By leaving them, go back and make them laugh. Say some jokes, go back and enjoy their company, let them enjoy your company, let them hold you, let them feel you, let them see you, and make them laugh like how you made them cry. So this is number 4 of the requirements. The explicit requirement that came in the Sunnah is that you should not travel unless they seek permission. And we are talking about long travels that are painful. Al-infaq alayhima wa saddi hajatima. Obviously, it's an obligation to make sure that, especially if your parents are in need, it becomes an obligation upon you to spend upon them, to spend on them, to sustain them, whatever they need to sustain them. That is an obligation. Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anh, he says, a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I have wealth and I have children. And this father of mine, he is almost consuming all my wealth. Meaning I have responsibilities towards my children, but my parents, he wants to take all my wealth. The Prophet ﷺ told him, Anta wa maluka li abik. You and your wealth belong to your father. You and your wealth belong to your father. And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Inna awladakum min atyabi kasbikum. What your children has, or what your children earn, is part of your own earnings, one of the most pleasant form of earnings. So you bringing up a child, and then this child has rizq in them. If you need it, then it is for you. فَكُلُوا مِنْ كَسْبِ أَوْلَادِكُمْ. So eat from the provision of your children. So that's requirement number 5. Again, this is explicitly mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Number 6, one of the obligations, which is easy but often neglected, الدعاء لهما, whether in their life or after they pass away, to make dua for them. And this is one of the greatest ways of showing يعني بر الوالدين towards their parents. You make dua for them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive them, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will shower them with his mercy. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, من صنع إليكم معروفا فكافئوه. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, whoever does a righteous deed to you or does a favor towards you, then reward them. If you cannot reward them, he says, make dua for them. The Prophet ﷺ, he says. So if this is something that you would do to any person that does you a favor, then how come when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to the parent? Obviously, you can never pay back the parents for whatever they did to you, So the only way for you to reward them according to this hadith is to make dua for them. So the dua is only part of what you are obliged to give to your parents, and it's also mentioned in Surah Al-Isra when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, chapter 17, verse 24, وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Say in your dua, O Allah, have mercy on them as they have raised me a young child. Also the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَتُرْفَعُ دَرَجَتُهُ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. He says a person will be in Jannah, a man would be in Jannah, and his rank in Jannah would be lifted, will be raised. فَيَقُولُ أَنَّا لِي هَذَا. And then he will ask, where is this coming from? فَيُقَالُ لَهُ, it will be said to him, بِاسْتِغْفَارِ وَلَدِكَ لَكَ. This is happening as a result of your son seeking forgiveness for you. So you're seeking of forgiveness for your late father or late mother. It will cause them to raise in Jannah بإذن ta'ala, according to this dua. And the least really one should do in terms of making dua, how often do you make dua for your parents? The least you should do is 5 times a day. Meaning, if you include them in your salat, if you become in the habit of, for example, say, every time I do my tashahhud, every time I do my tahiyyat, then I will make sure that in the last part of my tashahhud, before I conclude the salam, I will make sure that I say something in my dua to make dua for my parents. And I will make that a fixed part of it. Or between the 2 sajda. Or saying, for example, in the sajda of the last rak'ah, in the 2 sajda, in the last rak'ah, I will dedicate that for my parents. That is also a part of your dedication or part of your birr al-walidain. بعض التابعين said, من دعا لأبويه في كل يوم 5 مرات فقد أدى حقهما. He says, whoever makes dua for his parents 5 times a day, then he would have fulfilled their rights in terms of dua. He says, on what basis? He says, لأن الله تعالى قال أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, show thankfulness to me and to your parents. And then he says, فشكر الله تعالى أن يصلي في كل يوم 5 مرات. Showing thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by praying 5 times a day. And likewise should be showing thankfulness to the parents, that you would make dua for them 5 times a day. And the best way to do that is to include them in a fixed part of your salat, and remember them always when it comes to this part of the salat. Some of the Sahaba, they used to say, ترك الدعاء للوالدين يضيق العيش على الولد. Some of the Sahaba, some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ used to say that abandoning making dua for the parents will make the life of a person tight. They will make the life of the child tight, meaning they will have difficulties, their risk will be limited because they have neglected their dua. So one of the things that you will experience if you are one who is known to make dua for your parents, you will find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expand things for you. So that's number 6. Number 7, when it comes to the etiquettes that we are learning, adab at-ta'amul ma'a al-walidain, the etiquettes of dealing with the parents, is to know that this is not limited to righteous parents, and it's not also limited to parents that are Muslim. Any parents are entitled for these Islamic rights, whether they are righteous or not, and whether they are Muslim or not. If they deserve that kind of treatment from you, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the previous ayah I mentioned from Surah Luqman. But also specifically, Asma bint Abi Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anha, she said, أتتني أمي راغبة في عهد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. She said, my mom migrated from Mecca to Medina, and she came and she was hoping that Asma, and she was kafir at the time, and she was hoping that Asma, her daughter, would be dutiful towards her. She will show her kindness, she will show her hospitality, and she will look after her. So she came to the Prophet ﷺ, Asma, the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. She came to the Prophet ﷺ and she said, أَصِلُهَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. She said, shall I show her kindness and dutifulness towards her when she is still a non-believer? The Prophet ﷺ, he says, نعم. Yes, show her dutifulness. And obviously the best type of dutifulness towards the parents, especially when they are non-Muslims, is to dedicate a lot of time in making sure that you invite them to Islam. Everything else pales in comparison. Buying them meals, buying them gifts and clothes or whatever. What is that if you know as a son that they will end up going to the fire of hell? So one of the best ways of showing kindness to the parents when they are non-Muslims is to make sure that you dedicate a lot of time and a lot of dua to make sure that you bring them into the fold of Islam. As long as they die Muslims, then they will be fine, inshallah. Likewise, with the parents who are Muslims, if they are upon sinful deeds, or if they don't pray, or they don't fast, or anything like this, it is not befitting for a son or a daughter to abandon them and then go to give da'wah to other people. And it is a common mistake that you find that sometimes the parents of some people who are involved in da'wah, they are lacking the basic requirements of Islam. They don't know how to read Quran, for example. They don't know how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha properly. They don't know at-tashahhud for the salat. They don't know dua al-istiftah. Many things are missing in their lives. They don't know how to do their dua for before they go to bed, or in the morning, or in the evening. They don't know how to protect themselves in terms of the dua, tahsinat. A lot of things are lacking in the life of the parents, and it is a duty of somebody who is genuinely seeking the pleasure of Allah in their da'wah to make sure that your da'wah is first and foremost dedicated to your parents. It is not fair for you to give da'wah to the people who are further away from you when the people who are closest to you are stumbling in the darknesses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. And when you give warning, give it to the people who are closest to you. So these are the 7 elements that are explicitly mentioned in the Sunnah or in the Quran by text. Now I will delve into other aspects of etiquettes that are not explicitly mentioned in relation to the parents, but they are known either by hadith or by Sunnah or by the Quran, that they are ways of handling people in the most respectful of ways. For example, the ulama, they said, one of the ways, number 1, and you can count with me as well, these are the secondary list of etiquettes. Number 1, al-isgha'u ilayhima, that you will listen attentively when they speak, because it's a common knowledge that you cannot show respect to a person if you are not looking at them or paying attention to them when they speak. If you are interrupting them, you will not do this to anyone you respect. You will only be heedless when you speak to somebody who you do not respect. Anyone you respect, you make sure that you show eye contact with them. You will show them that you're listening, and you would actually sometimes repeat in your own words whatever they said. So this is called al-isgha. Al-isgha meaning paying close attention to them. This is a sign of respect. If you don't do that, then you're not respecting your parents. It doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter how you address them, but when they speak, if you don't show them that you appreciate the production of their brain, the production of their intelligence, then you're not respecting them. This can be particularly difficult when you are highly educated, when you have lots of knowledge, and you have parents who are not educated, or when your parents have become old in age. They can say things that are not the most logical or the most reasonable. So that can be a test, So one of the tests for your dedication or your birr al-walidain is to make sure that you listen to them attentively. And the amount of happiness and joy you can show your parents simply by listening to what they have to say is immense. It's something that you cannot buy them with money. Just sitting down with them and listening to what they have to say. This is an act of birr al-walidain that you should be mindful of. Let alone, like I said, you cannot interrupt them. You cannot dispute with them facts that are unnecessary, and you have to make sure that you don't belie them. You don't say that this is untrue, or this is inaccurate, or this is completely false, or to reject what they say. Okay, things that you would say to your friends is not befitting for you to say with your parents. Sometimes you can be very dismissive to an argument with your friend by saying, okay, let's agree to not or to disagree. Right? This is not something you can say to your own parents. You have to show them humility, and you humble yourself toward them. Like I said previously, the second thing on this list is to show them that you are happy, you are obeying them, fulfilling their commandments willingly. So you don't show them by your attitude. You don't raise your hands. Okay, I'll do it. Whatever they ask of you, you need to show them that you are doing it willingly, because it will be pointless for you to do anything they ask of you while showing them that you're not happy to do it, or that they have become a burden on you, or they have become a form of nuisance to you. That is not to do with birr al-walidain. In fact, this is part of uquq al-walidain. You hurt their feelings by making them feel that they are a burden to you. Number 3, at-tatalluq lahuma, is to make sure that when you speak to them, you are always cheerful, you are always smiling, you are always happy, in a good mood, and you don't frown at them, you don't become miserable, you don't become harsh in your treatment to them. You show them that you are happy and you are always cheerful, like how your friend will find this very good etiquette when you do this with them. Also, your parents will find that very appreciated. Also, one of birr al-walidain, that's number 4 in this list, is to make sure that you always acknowledge their favors upon you. You always tell them, Mom, Dad, who am I without you? What I am today is nothing had it not been for your efforts, for your sacrifices, for your whatever you did in my life is due to you. طيب, Abi Murrah, one of the tabi'een, he says, I was with Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, this great companion, and he said he had a piece of land in some side of Medina, and then when he went there, فإذا دخل أرضه صاح بأعلى صوته. When he enters his territory or his land, he would raise his voice and he say, Assalamu alayki wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu ya ummatah. He would raise his voice and say, Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear mother. And then she would say back to him, Wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Then he would say, Rahimaki Allahu kama rabbaytini saghiran. He would say to her, may Allah have mercy on you like how you raised me a little child. Then she would reply, فَتَقُولُ يَا بُنَيْ وَأَنْتَ فَجَزَاكَ اللَّهُ خَيْرًا وَرَضِيَ عَنْكَ كَمَا بَرَرْتَنِي كَبِيرَةً. She said, oh my dear son, you too, may Allah bless you and reward you for the way you looked after me whilst in my old age. So this idea of always acknowledging to your parents that you are nothing without them. You will not be here today had it not been for the sacrifices they did, had it not been for all the things that they did for you, you will be nothing. So this is something that will bring them immense joy and happiness, and you should make sure that you work on that. Also, number 5, التودد لهما والتحبب إليهما.
Sorry, Sheikh, could you just repeat the name of the Sahabi?
Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu.
Abu Hurairah
radiallahu anhu. So number 4 here is to show affection. التودد لهما. You all know by now that tawaddud is the actions that show love in the heart. So hub is the feeling that you have within your heart, but tawaddud is the actions that come out of that feeling. So it's not sufficient for you to say, okay, I love them, and they know, but rather you should show them a lot of tawaddud, meaning going out of your way to show them that you love them. And part of that is to always make sure that you are the first to begin with the salam. You are the young, and you always give them the salam first. You kiss their hands, you kiss their heads, and you provide them with the space to sit in your living room, for example, or in your sofa. And when you eat, you don't extend your hand to the food before they do that. And the ulama, they say also in the daytime that you will walk behind them, but in the night you will walk in front of them, meaning if there is danger, you would want to be the one that pave things for them and protect them from it. But in the daytime, when there is no danger, you will show them that you are subservient to them, you are following to them. They are not the one behind you. So you will honor them by giving them the lead. If they are walking, you walk behind them during the daytime. In the night, if there's any danger or if they need your help with anything, you walk in front of them just as a provider. You provide them for whatever they need. But generally, you assess what is more honorable and you give it to them. So the ulama, they said, you should always seek every opportunity to show them that you love them. So love that is in the heart is not sufficient. But at-tawaddudu lahuma, meaning to show them that you have affection towards them in your actions. And part of that, number 6, you can add to the list, number 6 is to make sure that you show this etiquette when you sit with them. So when you are seated in your sofa or in your living room, you can sit in a relaxed way, you can raise your hand, you can put your feet on the table. But if they come into the room, immediately you should change the way you sit. First and foremost, if you are taking the most comfortable seat, get out of it and give it to them. Also, if you are raising your hand or if your garments are not covered properly, if your body is not covered properly, you make sure that you sit properly and you show them respect, just as you would if somebody important has come to visit you. Don't show them that you don't care. You are still reclining and in the sofa, raising your feet up in their presence. This is not how you should be sitting when you are in the presence of your parents. Number 7, that you will not gaze at their eyes directly, in this strong way of looking at somebody, because looking at somebody in a direct way is good to show them that you are paying attention. But part of the etiquette as well is sometimes to look at them and sometimes to look away. Because when you look away, you are showing that you have humility towards them. You're not gazing at them in the eyes in a direct way. This is something that you would do, for example, if you have some of the traffic runs. If you cross somebody in a junction and they pass by you, they want to show you how upset they are. So they will be looking at you in the eye, to show you that you've upset them. So they keep staring at your eyes, and a way of showing you disrespect. So when it comes to your parents, you are required to look at them in the eyes to show them that you are paying attention, but only that much. Otherwise, you look away. You lower your gaze or you look at another direction. Because constantly looking at somebody in the eye is an indication that you don't hold them in high esteem. Right? Just think of how you would speak to a lecturer, for example, or an imam in the masjid, or how you would speak to somebody who is superior to you at work. You will not be gazing and staring at their eyes in a constant way. So likewise, you should not be looking at their eyes in this direct way. Muawiyah ibn Ishaq narrated that Urwa ibn Zubayr radiyallahu anhu, he said, ما بر والده من شد الطرف إليه. One who looks directly and stares at the eyes of their parents, they have not shown them bir. They have not shown them the right level of respect. Number 8 in the etiquette as well is to make sure that you don't remind them of your favors upon them. You don't remind them of your favors upon you. You don't say to them, oh, mom, remember what I did this to you the other day, or dad, remember that I was the one who did this for you. You don't do that. This is called al-minna. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that this is one of the things that will nullify your deeds. It will nullify your deeds with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. Do not nullify your charity by reminding the poor of your charity towards them. Because by doing that, you will ruin your reward. Any reward that you have done or you have taken with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be cancelled out. And also, that love that you have created in the heart of the person that you gave them the charity, that will be taken away the minute you reminded them of what you've done to them. And part of that reminder is to show them that they owe you respect. You do somebody a favor, but then from that point onwards, you expect them to get up for you when you come. You expect them to greet you in a certain way, and if they don't, you will be upset or you will be angry at them. That is a type of minna. Likewise,
Sheikh, this ayah that you quoted is in Surah Al-Baqarah, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have the number?
The number, I'll bring it to you, inshallah, in a minute, brother. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى. طيب, this is verse 264 of Surah Baqarah. Do not nullify your righteous deeds or your charities by reminding the poor of your favor upon them. That will cancel out your reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it will also cancel out the love that you had in their hearts for you. So for the parents, the same thing applies. You can never remind them of anything, any type of dutifulness or any types of kindness that you've done to them. You can never do that with them. You will break their hearts. Right? And you should remind yourself that you are nothing had it not been for them. So you and everything you do is actually their property. So you have nothing to make them feel indebted for you. Number 9, that you would help them in the house chores. It is not befitting for somebody who wants to exercise birr al-walidain that you will know that your mom and your dad are doing things around the house or going shopping, and you are doing nothing but sitting down with your joystick or PlayStation playing all day long, when your mom is doing the laundry, she's doing the washing up, she's doing the cooking, she's doing everything, and you're sitting down with your feet up. This is not birr al-walidain. Think of how are they feeling, knowing that their son, their daughter, their daughter, they are in their room playing with their phones, social media and the like, when the parents are tired doing all the house chores. So they said, the ulama said, this is not something that is anything to do with respect. You will not do this if you go in a trip with your friends, for example. If you go to a trip with your friends, and if somebody is in the kitchen doing all the washing or doing all the cooking, you will not be kind, you will not be respectful towards that person if you expect them to do this all the time when you are just chilling and relaxing in the living room. So likewise, this applies to your parents. Number 10.
Sorry, Sheikh, on that point, if I may.
Yeah.
Sometimes the laziness kicks in, and you may make excuses to yourself about should I really get up at this time, or maybe I done the other work already and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
At this moment, are you sinful for not helping them, or if it's not sinful, if it's disrespect, how would you overcome this?
You practice makes perfect, basically. A lot of what I say here maybe are habits that have become the norm these days. People don't see nothing in this. But when you reflect in it, just the basic question you should always be asking yourself, if this was a friend of mine and I treat them like this, would they feel that I'm respecting them if I did this with them? If the answer is no, then definitely your parents should not be treated that way. And the ulama, when they brought all these etiquettes, this is how they did it. They actually looked at every hadith that spoke about every type of etiquette, every type of adab, and they listed it here, thinking that if this can be applied to a stranger, then it is more so towards the parents. That's how they came up with this list. So the rule is anything that you will not do with a friend or with anybody that you respect, like a teacher, a lecturer, an imam, or a leader, or a community leader, or whatever, anything that you will not do in their presence, then you should not do it in the presence of your parents. That's the rule. But you will see that the same thing applies to whatever I'm going to say here, inshallah.
Sheikh, sorry, one more question on this.
Mm-hmm.
And this refers to all the etiquettes.
Yes.
When we speak about the mercy of the mother, mm-hmm. and how she's merciful and stuff, mm-hmm. this can sometimes cloud your judgment in thinking that maybe she will not mind, or maybe she will not hold it against me, mm-hmm. if I don't show this or that in, mm-hmm. some of these etiquettes. So how I understand this example, but is there anything that would overcome this, or you could convince yourself otherwise? Because especially when you're lazy or when you're in a state of being tired, it's difficult to have that discipline,
Mm-hmm. I mean, if somebody is happy to help you, happy to serve you, they are bound to feel abused if you do this all the time, including the mother. I mean, think of your wife, for example. She's happy to cook for you. She's happy to do the laundry, do the washing, but she'd really appreciate if every now and then you would go into the kitchen. If every now and then you say, okay, I'll take care of this. But if you're the type of person who just dump everything on her, even though this is her duty, but the fact that you show no understanding, you show no helping towards her, it will make her feel a little bit bitter, even though she is willing to do all of that. So the fact that somebody is willing to help you and serve you, it doesn't mean that they will not feel that you are abusing them. So in their heart, they will have the two things. They are happy to help you, but at the same time, they are feeling a little bit hurt that you are not showing any gentleness, any understanding, any appreciation towards them. Does that make sense, my brother?
Yeah,
so number 10, as to stay as far as you could possibly be from causing them any form of discomfort or noise, especially if they are sleeping. You don't make noises in the house, you don't raise your voice, and definitely you have to watch what you say to them in terms of delivering bad news. This is something that we, like the brother said now, we take it for granted. We think that, okay, she's my mother, he's my father, and telling them about my life and whatever I'm going through is part of their duty. They would want to know, and if I don't tell them, they will be upset. They will want to know. So part of your duty is to make sure that you protect them for any news or anything that will cause them discomfort. Right? And I mentioned something along those lines concerning a lady or a girl that gets married, and then as it's known and expected, the first year or two in the marriage are the most difficult, because this is when you meet somebody new and you adapt to them and they adapt to you. A lot of conflicts, a lot of tension takes place in the first couple of years. So she should understand that this doesn't warrant her disrupting the peace of her parents by telling them what's going on and complaining to them, my husband is doing this, my husband is doing that. No, you should be mindful that keep things away from your parents to protect them from any type of pain, any type of discomfort, any type of hurt, because you are a son, and anything that hurts you will definitely hurt them. So part of your birr al-walidain, part of your kindness towards them is to protect them from all of that. So first and foremost, you don't cause noise to them when they are asleep, but also when they are awake, to make sure that what you tell them, Now, what is relevant to our discussion here, sometimes you have parents who are not really listening to the news and following the most recent updates about coronavirus and COVID-19 and what's happening. So how much of that would you convey to them? You need to protect them. If some of that information they don't need to know, because some of that information will just make them very worried in an unreasonable way, and that stress could cause them to have problems. Their immune system goes down, especially if they have chronic conditions that will make them more susceptible to the disease. Then part of your birr al-walidain towards them is to protect them from that news. So you would not watch the news in their presence, for example. Right? Flip the channel to something different, something that is more lighthearted and more good for their hearts. So this idea of thoughtfulness, you're always thinking about your parents. Where are they emotionally? Where are they mentally? And being there for them in that way. Number 11 is to make sure that you avoid any type of argumentation, any type of conflicts or dispute with your siblings in front of them. And if anything happens in their absence, you don't convey to them. Whatever happens between you and your brother, your parents don't need to know about it, because it will hurt them a lot, and it will cause them a lot of distress, and they will not be able to sleep at night knowing that you and your sibling have problems. Number 12 in the list of the etiquettes is to make sure that when they call you, you rush to respond to their call. Your mom calls you, whether by shouting from one room to the other, or by calling you on the phone. If you are not doing anything that is critical, drop everything and attend to them. Drop everything. Obviously, like I said before, unless they are expecting of you something that is unreasonable, like calling them every hour or every half hour, or they are causing you a lot of stress. That's not what we're talking about here. But if your dad calls you, says Mansoor, you shouldn't say, yes, I'm coming, and then go downstairs in 15, 20 minutes. That is not birr al-walidain. Birr al-walidain is to make sure that if they call you, you say, yes, mom, yes, dad, I'm coming, and then immediately you drop everything in your hand and go and attend to them. Because that upsets them. It hurts their feeling. Like I said from the beginning here, you are dealing with parents who are the cause of your existence, and therefore their expectations of you are quite high, and they will be hurt by the slightest of things. So thinking that, okay, it's not a big deal, they called me 10 minutes ago and I'm coming down now, it's not a big deal for you, but for the sensitive parents, it is a big deal. Right? So that's part of Birr al-Walidain, is to make sure that you rush into their responding to them when they call you out. Number 13, which is a sensitive part here, is to make sure that you reconcile between your parents. A lot of the times, and I'm sure this happens to mostly many of us, you will find that your mom and your dad, they have issues between them, they have tension. You should not think that, okay, this is none of my business, I will stay out of it. That is not Birr al-Walidain. Birr al-Walidain is to make sure that you be there for them. You try your best to make sure that you speak to your dad and you speak to your mom, and you are allowed to lie. You can go to your dad and say to them, my mother says beautiful things about you, Dad. And she says how much she loves you, and she says you can lie, basically. Like, obviously you have to be smart on how you lie, but you cannot, it is not part of Birr al-Walidain. Is for you to know that your mom and dad are not in good terms, and you are completely oblivious of that. You're saying that this is their business, meaning that you know that they are hurt, they are in pain, but you can't be bothered. How could that be Birr al-Walidain? Birr al-Walidain is for you to know that if your parents are going through any pain, you feel their pain, right? And you do something about it. A lot of us, may Allah forgive us, when we know that our parents are going through this difficult time, we say, I'm going to stay out of it. That is not Birr al-Walidain. What you should stay out of is taking sides or having ill feelings towards either of the parents, and be very careful with that when it comes to conflict. One of the parents may be a little bit more eloquent in the way they express their grievance and their problem, whereas the other parents maybe are not as articulate, or maybe one of the parents are more open to telling you the details, whereas the other parent is more protective. They want to protect you from knowing that. So the fact that you know negative things about one of the parents, that doesn't mean that you have the full picture. So stay out of judging any of your parents. The dynamic that takes place between the father and the husband, only Allah knows about it. So you as a child, you are not there to judge either of them. You're not there to think that, okay, it's my mom who wronged my dad, or my dad who wronged my mom. That's not your role. Your role is to do your best to make sure that you reconcile. And like I said, if you have to lie between them, you have to lie. You can do that. Number 14, they said that you should seek permission. The ulama said that you should seek permission when you enter their room, their house, if they have a house of their own, or a wing of their own, or a floor of their own. You should not just enter, because doing that is a sign of disrespect. If you respect somebody, you will not enter their house or their personal space or their room without knocking on the door, or without asking permission. So asking permission is an indication that you hold them in a very high regard and you would respect them. Number 15 of the things you should do towards being in the Birr al-Walidain with your parents is to make sure, like I mentioned it previously, is to make sure that if they are ignorant of the deen, you dedicate some time to make sure that you teach them, so that they are able to have a little bit of happiness in their hearts. If you are a practicing individual, you have learned a lot of your deen, and you know that, subhanAllah, you have a lot of happiness in your heart because of how much knowledge you know, how much Quran you can recite, how much hadith of the Prophet ﷺ you know, you have tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know how to make dua towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have a lot of peace and a lot of joy in that, knowing that your parents are deprived of all of this and you can't be bothered. That is part of uquq al-walidain. You need to teach them whatever they need, especially if you know that, for example, your father is somebody who is stressed all the time. What they need to know is they need to learn about tawakkul. You should see it as a duty of you to teach them about tawakkul, or talk to them about tawakkul, or put a lecture for them to listen about tawakkul. But you cannot see that your dad's health and mental health and physical health are crumbling right before your own eyes, and you can't be bothered. Whereas you know what is the remedy to them. Right? So whatever you know of the deen that your parents are ignorant of, it's your duty to teach them and not leave them to stumble in the darknesses like this. Whether they accept it or not, that is not your obligation. But it is not birr al-walidain to know that your parents are suffering due to ignorance about knowledge that you have, and you still do nothing about it. That is not birr al-walidain. In fact, this is uquq al-walidain. So you need to be very mindful of this one. And this gives us a lot of scope on when we are spending time with our parents, what is it the kind of things that we should be speaking about? We know their issues, we know their difficulties, we should be always helping them with that regard. Yes, brother, who was asking?
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to say, sometimes, rather, is it better sometimes just to talk to your parents in a conversational way about whatever it is, in more of a natural way? Because sometimes it might be the case you do start sitting down and teaching your parents, and they might think, who is this guy?
Of course, barakallah fiqh. Yes. I mean, when I say teaching your parents, and always maintaining this inferior position, realizing that you should always speaking to them from a higher point of view, or rather from a lower point of view, thinking that you are the inferior one and they are the superior one. If you think that you cannot teach them except by perhaps asking them questions, there's always ways of to Mu'adh and Mu'awwidh radiyallahu anhuma. They met this old man who did not know how to make his wudu, and then they thought, what's the best way to teach him? So they disputed in front of him. They said, oh uncle, me and my brother are arguing which of us knows how to make the best wudu, or the prophetic wudu. So they said to him, could you look at us and be the judge and tell us later on which of us is the best? So they made wudu, and their wudu was identical, but all they wanted is to make sure he's watching and he's learning from them. And they maintained him by being the superior one, the one who is judging them and the one who's teaching them. But he picked up on that and he made dua for them. So yes, wisdom when it comes to the parents, you need to be very wise, you need to be very gentle. And yes, parents are very sensitive when it comes to this sort of things. However, at the same time, I can tell you that parents are also very appreciative when they know that their son or their daughter has something to teach them. They will be very proud of you, and they will not feel hurt by this. They will think that mashallah, my son knows this, mashallah, my daughter knows this. So do your best to be gentle, do your best to be indirect when it comes to teaching them. But what you should not be doing is, you should not see them in the darknesses and then leave them there. This is what you should not be doing. Especially when things that are very serious. For example, if you know that your father or your mother, they have shirk beliefs, for example, or they have practices that are to do with shirk, and that could affect their akhirah. If you know that, for example, your dad doesn't make wudu properly, your mom doesn't know how to do certain things that are affecting her salat or her tahara, then it's definitely an obligation, and you will be sinning, and you will be accountable before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you haven't done that. I'm careful with the time, and I need to make sure that we finish this one before the time lapses. Number 16, to make sure that you consult them occasionally. Every now and then, sit with your mom, sit with your dad, and ask them about something. Because this is one of the greatest ways of showing somebody that you appreciate their knowledge, you're appreciating their wisdom, especially in old age, when parents start to think that they have no role to play in your life. They feel that they've been marginalized and they are like, wasted something in the household. So one of the best acts of birr or ihsan towards the parents is to ask them, to consult them, to counsel, to seek their counsel, asking them, I am about to do this or to do that, and maybe even sometimes, even if they say something that is not really the best of counsels, you act upon their counsel just to make them happy, even though you know a better opinion. But a way of making them happy is to make sure that you seek their counsel and sometimes act upon it, even if it is something that is not the best suggestion. Number 17, they said, the ulama, that is to protect their honor. To protect their honor by protecting your actions in public. Because when you are misbehaving or not carrying yourself in the best of conduct, most of the time this will go back to your parents. You will be defaming the entire family. You will be defaming your parents, and you're bringing shame to them. So therefore, choosing your friends and making sure that you don't hang around with bad people is not something that you owe only to yourself, but you also owe it to your parents, because by hanging around with the wrong crowds, you are also ruining their reputation. So part of the birr of al-walidain is to make sure that you stay away from situations that are doubtful or sinful, and you stay away from companionship or friends that are not good for you. It will be an act of worship, an act of birr towards your parents that you do even though you're not in their presence. Number 18 is an issue that a lot of us sometimes, or I hear a lot of complaint about this one. Parents or children, brothers and sisters who have a very deep grudge against their parents, because they think that, my parents, my mom, my dad, they neglected me as a child, they abused me as a child, they hit me, they beat me, they did not do this to me, they did not encourage me to study. And you hold a lot of grudge against them, and then oftentimes you find that this feeling within you could manifest itself in the argument you have with them, in what you say to them, in the blame you direct towards them for the misfortune that you have in your life. You need to understand that your parents, even if they hit you, even if they abused you, whatever they did at that time, this is what they thought is best. It might have been entirely wrong, but they did it with the best of intention, according to what they had, according to what they received from their own parents, according to their education, according to their incitement, according to their wisdom, whatever they had at the time, their knowledge of how to parent. A lot of our parents, they come from unfortunate backgrounds, and it will just not be fair for us to expect them to bring us up in the most sophisticated of ways that even highly educated people are failing to do. So understanding that your parents, whatever they did with you, this is the best they could have done, and they did it with the best of intentions, and you should have no grudge against them. And that's why we said in the definition of ihsan is that ihsan first and foremost begins from the heart. No matter what their parents did to you, whether they shouted at you, whether they screamed at you, they denied you things, they did not buy you things, or they took you. I met a brother, for example, that was so angry with his parents because they took him to an Islamic boarding school where this person was bullied and whatever happened to him in that school. He was hurt, no doubt, but he cannot blame his parents. Right? One, because they did it with the best of intentions. Number two, it was the qadr of Allah. This child is meant to go through this. And whether the parents knew it or not, this is the path that Allah created for you. So even if the parents wanted to change the course of actions or the course of history, they couldn't. Allah has ordained that you will go through that boarding school and you will be bullied. So even if your parents wanted to take you to a different school, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have changed their opinion and change their intentions to take you to this particular school, because Allah has made a plan for you to go through that hardship and to go through that difficulty, and as a result you will grow through that. And a Bedouin was asked, كيف عرفت ربك? He was asked, how do you know that God exists? He says, عرفت ربي بعزائم الرجال. He says, I know about my Lord by the intention of men and women. Meaning that he will find that somebody who has a certain intention, they will sleep at night and they will wake up and that intention will completely dissolve. They no longer have interest to go in that direction. Or somebody who was completely empty-minded, and all of a sudden he's got this desire or this intention or this strong resolve to go in a particular direction. This is what Allah has planned for them, and they will have to go through that. So whatever you've been through, my brother and my sister, your parents, whatever they did, it is according to a plan that not you, not your parents, no one else could have changed that. You are meant to go through this. So you really cannot blame your parents. So, and definitely, if anything happens, you cannot blame them. You should forgive them for whatever they did. And in fact, you should believe that whatever they have put you through was only there to make you, not to break you. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who created all of that, and He made this plan for you. So this is number 18 on the list. Never blame your parents. For whatever type of parenting they did with you, don't blame them. Right? They are there as plans for you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your job in this dunya is to go beyond that and learn from it and become a stronger person through experience. Number 19, to make sure that you anticipate what they want, what they desire of you, especially when it comes to looking after your siblings. You know, especially if you are the eldest, looking after your siblings sometimes can be annoying. It can be sometimes you feel that you are wronged by being made to look after them when they are having fun and they are relaxing and you're doing all the duties. You should know that this is part of Birr al-Walidain, and it's very highly rewarding with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they ask you for it, you have to do it. If they don't ask you for it and you know that doing that will please them, you should do it without them asking. Number 20 in the list here is to do your best to understand their personality, to understand what they have been through in their life, where they have come from, whether they were shown love and affection by their own parents, whether they grew up as orphans or not, whether they have received education or not, whether they were bullied or not, whether they were the only child in their family or they were part of a big family. All these elements, they affect on a person, and they will affect on how much parenting they can show you, how much love and affection they can show you. Right? And if your parents cannot show you love and affection, you should never doubt that they have love towards you. They love you, but if they can't show it, it's because they are unable to show it. Not everybody is able to show love. Number 21 is to never hear or accept to hear any bad news about them. Right? Never allow anyone to speak ill of your parents in your presence, right? Including your parents themselves. Do not allow the father to speak ill about the mother, and do not allow the mother to speak ill of a father. Gently, in the most appropriate of ways, tell them, Dad, speaking badly about my mom hurts my feelings, and it's something that I will not allow to happen in your regard. I will not allow anybody to speak about you. And the same thing I would say about my mom. Don't speak about my dad like this in my presence. It hurts my feeling, and it's not fair, and it's going to put me in a position where if he tells me something, I will have to go and ask for his version of events. And if he tells me something, I'll have to come back to you with your version of events. And this is something that you don't want to do, and I don't want to hear. So you do it in the best of ways, and you don't allow anyone from the family or from neighbors or from anyone in the society to speak ill of your parents. And if they do, never allow it to settle in your heart. And you don't allow the parent themselves to do that to each other. Number 22, and I'm almost there, inshallah, is that you will not curse them or cuss them, the parents. This is one of the obvious things. But the Sahaba, when the Prophet he says, من الكبائر شتم الرجل والديه. He says one of the major sins is for one to cuss and curse his own parents. The Sahaba said, Ya Rasulullah, would anyone cuss and curse their parents? He says, Na'am. He says, yes, it's possible by cussing and cursing other people's parents, and then as a result, they will curse your own parents. So they said that this is also an act of uquq towards your own parents, because you cause them to be cussed and cursed by something that is nothing to do with them. Number 24 is to make sure that you don't disobey Allah in their presence. Yes, we all have sins in our lives. We all do wrong things, and we are struggling to make sure that we overcome them. We are struggling to make sure that we abandon all sins. But while we are working on that, make sure that if you have to do it, don't do it in front of your parents. It hurts them. It hurts them deeply, knowing that when you listen to music in their presence, or you would smoke in their presence, or you would do gambling in your presence, or you would be swearing in their presence. All of that, doing that in the presence of their parents, is nothing to do with Birr al-Walidain. It is part of Uquq al-Walidain. The list goes on, but I think now you got the gist of it. You understand it, and I don't want to take any longer than this. But in general, Birr al-Walidain is to have the attitude whereby you will not leave anything that you could possibly do to please your parents, except that you will do your best to do it. Okay, as long as it doesn't displease Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anything that displeases them, you will stay away from it as long as it's not an obligation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is, I will stop here with Allah ta'ala, and we will continue next week. If you have any questions, I will entertain, inshallah, some of your questions.
Inshallah. Sheikh, just one question. When making sure you consult them and asking them about something occasionally.
Yes.
If your parents is a person who, likes to share anything and everything because of their character, maybe they like conversation, etc., or whatever it is. Do we still share things with them, or is this still left down to our judgment? And
no, the rule is the same. Whatever they want to share with you. Is it backbiting? Is it slandering? Is it gossiping about other people?
Yeah. So say for example, if one has an issue that he would like to discuss with his parent, with his mom or his father, and he fears that they may share this with other people, and he doesn't want this.
Okay.
So in this situation, should he still share this or consult his mother about whatever it is, even though he knows that this will be spoken about in the community or amongst other family members? Should he or she maintain in his mind, well, whatever it is, I don't care, and have the attitude of khalas, whatever it is, I don't really.
Like I said, remember what you are aiming to do, brother. You are aiming to bring pleasure and joy in the heart of your parents. Right? This does not necessarily mean that you actually believe that what they have to consult what counsel they have to offer you is actually good or anything like that. So you can pretend, really. You can pretend to be consulting them about something that is superficial, not real. But when it comes to something critical and you don't quite trust them on how they can handle situations, you keep that to yourself. There is no obligation that you have to tell them everything about in your life, about your life. Does that make sense, brother?
Yes, of course, inshallah. And how about if they get upset if you don't talk about personal matters? Do you just disregard that and just leave it? How do you deal with that?
Remember the rule what we said before. If whatever, like what I said about Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi, when he said there's a rule, whatever they expect of you, you should go out of your way to fulfill it for them, except if it's not beneficial to them and if it's harmful to you. So if they ask you something that is harmful to you, like resign from your job, like mom, dad, this is going to be very harmful to me, I have a family to look after and I need my job, no, just resign from your job. So this is something that you're not obliged to entertain them with. If they ask something of you that is not harmful to you, but it is not beneficial to them either, they are just being exercising their power or enjoying their power, also in that regard you're not required to fulfill them or to fulfill their expectations of you. If what they are asking of you is not harmful, then try your best. But in your example, you're saying that if you tell them or if you consult them about something, then they will speak about this in the wider community, and that will bring you much harm and much difficulties in your whatever it is that you're doing. Then you are allowed not to speak to them. Inshallah. I think I have a couple of questions here on the YouTube. Somebody says that if I leave my parents and I would live in another city near my university, is this to do with uquq al-walidain? I say that depends. First and foremost, whether they have given the permission or not. Remember, we said that if you have to travel away from your parents and you don't see them for a prolonged period of time, you need to seek their permission. Have you sought their permission or not? Number two, by traveling away, do they have somebody who would look after their basic needs? So if by you traveling away, there is none who is going to look after them, do shopping for them, and look after them in many ways, then that's definitely sinful, and you need to abandon whatever you are traveling for, in this example, university, and go back and look after your parents. If their basic needs are not fulfilled except by you, you are not allowed to leave them. Treat you badly. What if your parents treat you badly? Would you respect them in the same way? If the parents do not treat you in a good way, and that can be subjective. Sometimes what you think is a bad way, sometimes it might be the best way they could show you love and affection. Sometimes they might be protecting you from something that you want when it's not good for you, and you'll be thinking that they're not treating me in a good way. But sometimes it could be possible that your parents are not doing what they are supposed to do naturally and religiously. They are not being loving and affectionate towards their children. And some parents, may Allah forgive them, are like this. In that case, what they have done, they have neglected their duty, and they will be accounted for that by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that does not in any way mean that you have the right to also neglect your duty towards them. They will be asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their duty towards you, and you will be asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concerning their rights upon you. And remember that the obligation to look after your parents is not simply because of your returning a favor. They are nice to you and therefore you are nice to them. No. Basically, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you. He said you should show them kindness. You should be dutiful towards them. So in honoring for the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to show them dutifulness regardless of how they are treating you. Like I said, except if they are harming you, then in those particular aspects in which they are harming you, you're not expected to fulfill their wishes. But other than that, وَصَاحِبْهُمَا فِي الدُّنْيَا مَعْرُوفًا, and accompany them in this dunya according to that which is known to be acceptable and reasonable. How can I, as a kid, honor my how can I honor my parents? I mean, the whole entire lecture was about this, inshallah, so you can go back through the recording, inshallah. Okay, we'll stop here. Jazakumullah khair.
Can I ask one last question?
Yes, brother.
In the last lesson, we spoke about someone who changes his name.
Yes.
Or takes the name other than his parents. What if someone is, in a hypothetical scenario, what if someone is ashamed of their parents and therefore wants to change their name? Is there an exception for this? Or if their parents have done crimes that would harm their life or something?
No, if there is danger, for example, if somebody is seeking to eradicate you or kill you because you are the son of so and so, then these are exceptional circumstances. But usually it is very hurtful for the parents to know that their child is attributing themselves to other than them. It will feel to them like you feel disgraceful that you belong to them and you came from their lineage. So one is not allowed to do that, and the Prophet he described it as an act of kufr, not the major kufr, but it's an act of denying other people's their favors upon you. So one should not do that unless exceptional circumstances.
Just maybe a follow-up question.
This is the last question, inshallah, and then you can ask me the questions, inshallah, in the Zoom session, inshallah.
Inshallah. In some scenarios, you might find one's father has passed away, and hence his or her mother has remarried again. And from a young age, she's been calling his stepfather father from a young age. And then this may be due to ignorance or whatever. How do you kind of deal with this?
Well, this has nothing to do with what the brother was asking about. Brother Wasim was asking about if you actually change your name. So rather than being called Wasim Abdullah, the father of your father's name is Abdullah, you call it Wasim Hussein, for example. This is an act of kufr. But then also,
I forgot to add that even if the name of the stepfather is taken, obviously it's wrong, but then due to ignorance, this may have happened on an occasion due to whatever reason. How do you deal with this?
Just make correction, really.
Make correction.
Yeah. Is you can always tell people, I thought it's permissible to do X, Y, and Z, but it turns out that this is impermissible, and therefore from now on, I'm going to do A, B, and C.
I presume from a young age, if you do have a stepfather, then it should be known that person is your stepfather and not your real father.
And it's not permissible in Islam to call this person dad or father. You should call them uncle. طيب سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.